Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Law, Your Money, and You. I'm Roberta Saphire, an attorney in Sharon, Massachusetts, New England.
And I'm Camille Barron, a financial coordinator and healthcare advisor, also in Sharon, Massachusetts, New England, USA. And, Roberta, one of the things that we're all very conscious of today is conservation of our natural resources. And people might be asking, well, what does that have to do with the law and your money? But actually, it does have a lot to do with it, because the more we're focusing on conserving our natural resources, the better off we're all going to be, and that includes financially as well. So we have a very interesting guest here to talk with us about that today.
Yes, it gives us great pleasure to introduce Rory McGregor. Oh my God, McGregor. Your mother would kill me. Your mother would kill me. I asked Rory what a great name it was, and he was telling me that his mother wanted to call him Rory, but his father wouldn't let him, so they called him Robert. So that's why. So instead of, I kept with the Rory there, but I screwed up on the McGregor.
You did not screw up, Roberta. And you also pointed out I have the same name as you, my first name being Robert, yours being Roberta. So it's very close. And my mother was in the Women's Royal Navy during World War II. Met my father preparing for D-Day as he was training in southern England. And they married after the war. And he brought her back to the United States because England was devastated. You know, they really had very little after the war. And my mother said, why not take the opportunity in the United States? I was born, and she said, let's call him Rory. You know, that's a very popular Irish name. My father said, no, I'm from Brooklyn, and that's not a name that we have in the United States. And we'll call him Robert. So that's how that came. But anyway, my mother did win because all of the people in Sharon know me as Rory. Sharon, Massachusetts, where I live. And I moved here in 1975 after doing 5 years in the US Army. During the tail end of Vietnam, I was in the Corps of Engineers. I had a period, a 2-year period with the facilities engineer in Kaiserslautern, Germany. And facilities engineers are responsible for, like DPW, for all of the real estate owned by the US Army in used by the US Army in southwestern Germany. That's where I had my initial exposure to city management, if you will, and all of the things that are related to taking care of property, whether it's family housing buildings, railroad depots, sewer treatment, you name it. So it was an exposure. But I had a technical background and decided to pursue high technology when I came back to the United States, located in Sharon since 1975. And during that time, I had a chance to serve with the newly created committee called the Water Management Advisory Committee. And this was a group of citizens in Sharon who were to advise the select board on water-related matters. And our principal partner was the DPW chief. At that time, it was Jack Sulik, later to become Eric Hooper.
And
So
EPW is environmental?
Department of Public Works.
Oh, Department
of Public Works in Sharon. They're responsible for all of our real estate, management of the real estate. So I've worked with our DPW chiefs since 1990, fairly closely on water-related issues. And with that exposure to water management for the town of Sharon, specifically the drinking water, because we want to provide good quality water to all the citizens of Sharon, and we want to make sure that any problems that come up, we can address them quickly and efficiently, depending on the nature of the problem. And then during the time that I was serving on the Water Management Advisory Committee, I met a person called Ian Cook from the Neponset River Watershed Association. And he gave a talk at the Sharon High School Library about what is a watershed and why should you be concerned. And he said that even though you have very good water in Sharon, you've got a very good management program, you affect other towns around you because the water that is in your water table actually is in Walpole's, Canton's, all the neighboring towns. And he said, think beyond just the borders of your town, because water is a watershed issue. And all of the towns in your watershed contribute to how well the water is supplied, its condition, and things that you should do, maybe other towns are doing before you, that you could learn from them to do them better. So I joined the Neponset River Watershed Association in around 2005, 2006, and I started to learn about all of the water that relates to the inhabitants in the Neponset River watershed. And that extends from Foxborough, where Gillette Stadium is located. The Neponset, or the Foxborough Reservoir, is actually the headwater of the Neponset River. And it extends from Foxborough all the way through towns to Dorchester and Quincy, where it flows into Dorchester Bay and to the ocean. So there are 14 townships or cities that are in that area, and Sharon is just one of them. And one of the interesting things about Sharon is that we are the highest elevation, along with Foxborough, in that group of towns. And therefore, that's why we are very close to the headwaters. And that's why people who are downstream of us, they probably receive the water that comes from our communities and try to take advantage of it in whatever way they can.
I just want to point out one thing. Years ago, there was a TB sanitarium here, and they chose here because the air was at a higher elevation and therefore better, much healthier.
They felt that the ozone, there was actually more ozone in the air, for one.
So what you're saying hits.
It's related. The interesting thing about being the highest elevation, water flows either north towards Boston, or it flows south towards southeastern Mass and Providence. And Sharon is one of those towns where 2/3 of our community, including Lake Massapog, our crown jewel, flows towards into the Neponset River and towards Dorchester Bay. 1/3 of our town is in the Taunton watershed, and the water from that area, like Canoe River, flows south towards the Taunton River and into the bay, down in southeastern Massachusetts. So it's a very interesting reality that we are the high point elevation wise, and therefore water has to flow one way or the other.
Rory, could you please tell our viewers what you mean by watershed?
Oh, good.
Watershed includes not just the water bodies and the tributaries and the streams and rivers, but it includes the land which holds the water that is actually part of that real estate, if you will. Underneath the ground, you can dig a hole, or you can dig a hole into the ground, and you will reach what is called the water table. It may be at just a few inches, it could be at 2 feet. It depends upon the nature of the geology where you live. But I know when I used to live on Glendale Road, we had a very hard clay barrier. But once we got through that clay barrier, we had water. And that's why that whole area around Glendale Road, Brook Road, it's very wet. And you really have septic issues in those areas because of the high water table. And I now live on Upland Road, right near the house that's on the island on Route 27 as you come into Sharon. And this is high elevation, and we've had no water problems in our basement. In fact, we don't even have a sump pump where we are.
Now that they know where you live, you'll have a lot of people knocking on your door. Just kidding.
And one other question that comes up sometimes when people say they have hard water, what does that mean, hard water?
Yeah, good question.
Well, it could relate to the chemicals or the natural chemicals, perhaps iron, perhaps manganese that might be in the water. And you can see with hard water, you may get deterioration in your like valves, pipes, more readily than you would otherwise. I know that when they flush the hydrants in our area, we oftentimes see a lot of rust or orange colored or red colored particles that are in the water. And if you get discolored water coming out of your tap, you you fill a glass, you let it sit there for 2 to 4 hours, you will see all those particles settle out into the bottom of the glass. Those are just really little iron manganese particles. They're not harmful to you, but they certainly cause you concern. And the biggest worry for people is when they wash clothes, they find that that water will discolor their clothing, especially white fabrics. So
Yeah,
we do-
sure. Mm-hmm.
And we
Sure.
do
Well,
get
I
phone
got a
calls.
question too. Every so often you read about the call for people to help clean out the rivers there of debris that people throw in. Now, if that's not cleaned up, is that what goes into the ocean in the end? And
Sure. Well,
So
number
you-
one, if say a 55-gallon drum, I just pulled several 55-gallon drums out of Bolivar Pond in Canton last Saturday with a crew of people. And those types of containers they rust and then they disintegrate over time. And that metal will physically embed itself in the soil and in the water. Some of it can seep down into the water table, meaning, through the soil eventually, and lodge itself even below ground. Other parts of it will simply flow with the water that's in the river, if that's the flowing part of the river, and go all the way to the ocean. One of the biggest problems that we have with the Neponset River, and we just were declared a Superfund site, the area of the river between the Tilston-Hollingsworth Dam in Hyde Park and the Baker Chocolate Dam in Milton has been declared a Superfund site. And the reason is that when electronics companies were in large number along the banks of the river, they would deposit or flow their waste in some cases directly into the river. And PCBs are a well-known chemical that are dangerous to human beings, and they've lodged themselves in significant quantity just upstream of these dam structures. They also can be found in the embankments along the river in the vicinity of the dams. We have two objectives with the Neponset River Watershed Association. One is to remove the dams and make them navigable by fish, both upstream and downstream. There was a time when we used to have shad in the river, herring, species that people could fish and eat, but that's not been the case in maybe 150 years. The objective of removing these dams is not only to allow fish to migrate freely, but we have to clean up the soil in those river beds to make sure that all PCBs are extracted and removed so that they can't be harmful to wildlife or to human beings.
That must be quite a job.
It's a major job, and I'm going to say that maybe 15 years ago, when an initial survey was done, the guess was it could be $10 million or more to remove those two dams. And I would imagine today that number has gone up significantly. But the important thing is, as a Superfund site, we will do a thorough analysis of the work to be done and have a design plan put in place, and then receive federal assistance to actually do
Are you saying Superfund, F-U-N-D, or fund?
Yes, Superfund. It's part of the Environmental Protection Agency's program. The federal government, the Environmental Protection
I was
Agency,
going to ask that next.
Yeah. Mhm.
they
Part
have
of
a
the federal-
program.
Program part of the federal government. So this isn't just limited to Massachusetts and New England. Is this all over the world of the United States? What do you have? You go one after the other. Do you have associations with the rest of the country to see what they're doing?
Well, we can certainly look at who is on the Superfund site list. That list has many watersheds and river bodies that are in trouble and need that type of attention. A problem that's affecting either the quality of the drinking water or the habitat that lives in that area. So it's not just us, it's many communities throughout the United States. And this all started back in 1970 when we had the first Earth Day, and the Environmental Protection Agency was created. So this is our federal watchdog and I guess chief agent for change in making things better, improving the structures that we've got to do what is important for us.
Excuse me, here I go again. My daughter's in Arizona with a lot of kids, and she's been there for 25 years. They will never touch the water from the sink. It's always bottled, and they're always checking me because even when they come here, they go, is that from the sink or this or that? Now, I have no trouble with the sink water. I'm still alive after living in Sharon for 45, 50 years. So what is it? Is it worse out there because it's desert, or what is going on out there? Do you know?
She would probably know better than I.
Oh,
Every community has local conditions that are relevant to why people will or will not drink the tap water. There are some Sharonites who will only drink bottled water,
Or they've installed filters, water filtration systems.
oh
in
yeah,
their
well, we
home.
got the filter. But
Mm.
we have, I think we have fluoride in our water. Do we still have fluoride in our water?
We have fluoride, yes, chlorine. We also treat it with some other chemicals, not harmful to humans, but just things that help us to keep the quality of the water in good condition. And water quality is number one priority for any town, because if you're pumping your own water, you want to make sure that the citizens have total confidence in what they're drinking.
A few months ago, or maybe a year ago, there was some, because of the criteria that changed around those PFAS. Can you explain a little more about that? They're known as forever chemicals. I know that, but can you explain what those are? And I know they're not just in water either, but I'm very curious.
They're called polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS. It embodies all of the polymers, which tend to be long chain molecules that can cause, I guess, harmful effects within human beings. The movie that came out about West Virginia and the chemical plants that were producing those particular polymers, I think it's called Deep Water or Dark Waters, but it showed the harm done to people and livestock in certain communities in West Virginia. And these polymers are used specifically to coat materials, like Teflon. It's a Teflon coating that can be used on your cookware. It can be used on your clothing. It can be used in a variety of applications, the production of electronic materials. Coatings are used everywhere, but these particular PFAS compounds, of which there are many, we're talking about tens, if not hundreds of different formulations. They have been shown to have a harmful effect on human beings. There's still a lot of debate as to what concentrations of these particles should be acceptable. Massachusetts has established a limit of 20 particles per trillion of these molecules that are allowable, which is a very low number. The instrumentation to do a good job of detecting and quantifying the amount in a water sample was only perfected really in the last few years. And that's why the governments, both state and federal, have become more aggressive in setting limits. We didn't have limits for a very long time, but now in the last 2-3 years, you've seen a lot of states actually setting limits even before the federal government has set a limit. So having done that, Sharon reacted very quickly. We tested the water from all of the pumping stations that we've got. We have 6 in the town of Sharon, and in particular, well number 4, which is right by the train station, and well number 2, which is on Moose Hill Parkway. We determined that the concentrations at those 2 wells was suspect. The one at number 4 was exceeding the limit of 20, and the one at well number 2 was just slightly below 20. Nonetheless, we shut those wells down immediately. We made arrangements to purchase, or I should say rent, a resin filter, a special resin filter that can be used to treat and remove the PFAS chemicals from the water. And that temporary filter is installed at well number 4 right now. And we were back online within, I'm going to say 90 to 120 days after we received that initial notice. So that temporary filter is in place doing its job. Well number 4 is back online. And now our long-term plan is to build a permanent facility that will treat water for PFAS and to put the filtration plant in a location where well number 2 is located, and then to have the water from both number 4 and number 2 go through that filter.
That's
And-
fantastic.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. And I bet the average person doesn't know anything about this, especially when they throw. I don't think it's as bad as it was before, but people just throw things. They throw things out. They throw things in if they go to the beach, they throw it in the water.
Our thinking, or at least our initial conclusion, is that the source of these PFAS chemicals is most likely the septic systems that we all have at our homes. And because of we wash our cookware after every meal, we wash clothes many times a week. Those are possible sources of.
You can't stop doing that.
You can't stop doing that, but now the companies that produce clothing and produce cookware, they're certainly making changes to what they use for their coating materials. And if they haven't made those changes, they'll be required to, without question, by both state regulations and federal regulations.
Now, the nonstick cookware, like Teflon was the original, is it all nonstick cookware or just certain types like Teflon?
Well, my hunch is it's probably most of them at this point. How quickly they're able to come up with safe formulations, I think, is the challenge. But they're certainly working on it. Some companies have made changes in that direction already. We still need regulations that would guide our manufacturing businesses in terms of how stringent they need to be, in terms of what formulations they can use. And I mean, we have to be realistic about this. You can't simply throw the switch and say you can't produce those coatings. You've got to give people time to come up with the right solutions without making it prohibitively expensive or possibly dangerous in a different way. You know,
What about something like the Mississippi River, which is much longer than the Neponset River, I think, that goes way up from north to south? What do they have to do? And I don't know how they.
Well, just think of all the states that
Yeah.
Mississippi flows through.
Yeah.
Every state along the Mississippi has a concern, as well as the federal government, because it's a very necessary river for transportation, movement of commercial or of commerce. You've got to keep the big picture in mind while realizing the water as it flows through whatever state it's bordering. That state has to pay particular attention to the local problems in their water table or watershed.
Boy, are we better off if we had sewerage than septic system?
Sewerage is an expensive investment, and it should be done when it really makes the most sense. The town of Sharon, which is not sewered at present, we have looked at the possibility of sewering the center of town and the area around Lake Massapog. Both locations have been considered, but we haven't made that decision yet to do it. And you've got to go through a cost-benefit analysis when you make that kind of an investment. And if it doesn't make sense financially, chances are you're going to stick with what you've got that's working right now, the septic systems. If the septic systems were failing us altogether, we would certainly make the change. But I think septic systems have worked for us. We keep learning new things. We didn't think much about PFAS until it really came to the national attention, and that was for the problems they saw in West Virginia. So we're learning from other communities which have suffered tremendously from the effects of PFAS.
How about throughout the world? We've hit, you know, because we go everywhere, but people will say, I'll have somebody call up from, well, we got some watches in Brazil. They call up and they go, well, is that here too? You know, or in Florida, is that here?
PFAS is everywhere.
Everywhere.
PFAS is everywhere. There's no doubt about it.
Are you saying
PFAS.
PFAS, P as in Peter?
The polyfluoroalkyl substances, that is those long chain polymers, you know, that you don't want it in your drinking water, but you can't avoid it being in your drinking water if everybody is using the same products that we are using, which you know they are in Brazil. Brazil is
I
a
bet,
very,
I bet it affects your whole system, your whole body system, these bad chemicals.
well, it can be cancer producing, which I think is one of the major concerns.
And they're known as forever chemicals because they're not easy to get rid of.
Correct.
Oh,
They
Correct.
infest themselves in a lot of different ways that are even unknown to us in many cases.
Right.
oh my God.
Mm,
Yeah, that's fascinating.
mm.
Believe it or not, we only have a few minutes left, but this is just incredible. I mean, I knew about I've seen the Neponset River Water Commission and the things, and they go boating on the Charles, and there was a few guys who went to clean up the ocean, and they were getting all that stuff. And then I saw with the Neponset River Watershed. That's fascinating. It's really, really fascinating, all the work you do. You're to be commended. You probably
Yes,
don't get
very
enough
impressive.
recognition.
One of
Very-
the nicer things about the Neponset River, we've created a greenway along the river from Tenian Beach in Dorchester all the way to Hyde Park, to the hatch shell in Hyde Park. There's a pathway where people can walk, bike,
Wow.
Oh,
run, and our vision
at the
is
Charles River.
it's
they
like the
have
Charles
that,
River,
I
but
know.
it's for the Neponset. We are the hidden river. The Charles River is the river everyone knows. The Mystic River is the one that everybody has seen in the movies, but the Neponset River is the one that only we know about because they don't have that kind of publicity or visibility for the river. That's why I'm telling you about the Greenway, because it's something that's worth doing if you ever decide to take a stroll along the Greenway.
Yes.
I'd love to do
interesting.
that. Where exactly can you access that?
Yes,
Anywhere
good
between
question.
Tenian Beach and Dorchester, Pope John Paul Park along the estuary of the Neponset, DCR Park, which is right next to Pope John Paul Park.
Uh-huh.
Mattapan has a location called the Harvest Bridge at the Ryan Playground.
Oh, I didn't
And
know that.
Hyde Park
Oh.
has the hatch shell, which I'm sure it's got a name, but I've done many cleanups along the Neponset in
The
Hyde
hatch
Park.
shell, there's the hatch shell in Charles River. That's not the
It's a
same.
different
hatch
hatch
not-
shell?
But it's the same idea. It's
Wow. Maybe this weekend we'll go and take a stroll along there. It sounds lovely.
it's right along Truman Parkway in Hyde
I know what
Park.
Truman Parkway is.
Sure.
I used
Okay,
to have
Roberta.
relatives there.
We'll go out and take a walk this weekend. How about that?
Yeah, that would be great. But I had relatives living along there. That used to be nice. It brings back memories. All these old cities coming back. I wonder if that's in other states too, where the old cities are coming back. But that Tenian Beach, is that near South Boston, Pat?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, but it's Dorchester.
Oh, they call it Dorchester.
It's in Dorchester. You won't find it in South Boston.
Oh, that's circle. Yeah, I have to figure that out.
They have differences in their communities, just like we have in Sharon and Walpole and Foxborough.
Well,
South
Sharon's
Boston.
unique. In the high school, I always tell people, in our high school, we have 90 different nations represented. We're very, very unique.
Amazing.
Although I'm seeing the difference out in Phoenix too. It's changing. It's really wonderful. I don't think the world is as bad as when you turn on the news. You want to go, oh my God. But anyway, we got 1 minute left. We have to wind up. Rory, thank you so much. And if your mother's still around or wherever she might be, you tell her I love the name Rory.
She's listening to you in heaven.
Oh,
Okay,
good.
all right, well,
Okay, well, thank you
okay,
so
so
much.
thank you very much, Rory. This has been really things that we've never heard about before. So thank you so much for
Okay.
sharing.
My
And to our
pleasure.
viewers, we welcome any comments or feedback or questions you have about this topic or any other topic. We'd love to hear from you, because remember, this is your show, the law, your money, and you.
You.